Hello, no pressure. I could always just hit escape, right? So I'm Matt Farber. I'm an assistant professor of technology, innovation, and pedagogy at the University of Northern Colorado, and I write about games and learning, a couple of books, and write for Edutopia also on the subject. But I'm going to start the story with Sean Berman. Sean Berman is a 7th grade student from Queens, and he made a video game. He actually won the Games for Change Student Challenge last spring. His game is called Adventures in New York, and it was an autobiographical game a biographical game about his grandmother who emigrated from Russia to the United States. And in the game, you play actually as the Scratch Cat, and you communicate using English, but non-playable characters communicate back using wingdings. And I will let his intro here explain why it's so important to have students make games about serious topics. So to rewind a bit, I'm a former classroom teacher. I was a middle school teacher for 9 years up until this past June, and I use serious games in my classroom like 1979 Revolution and board games also like Pandemic. And NPR visited my class and ran a piece last spring about my use of the migrant trail in the classroom. But to use games like this in the classroom, even the migrant trail, which doesn't actually have a lot of what's called transportation theory to draw you into the experience, it takes a lot of framing. So this is a quote from one of my students. We were creating sequels to games using Twine, making interactive fiction story, and then I said, guess what, you're coding. Oh, I hate coding. That's because she was doing a lot of rote puzzle-based coding, not coding through self-expression. So I don't even use loaded words like coding, games, gamer. I like to start with empathy, though, because that's where you start making games. This is an example of a student-made game. 2 girls, age 12, made this game where you're immigrants and you are border patrol, and it's an unwinnable system. They designed that on purpose. The mechanic is the message. So we asked ourselves, how can we scale this? How can we bring this attitude to more students? So we brought back to life the Moveable Game Jams, which Kevin Miklosh over there started with Alex Fleming from Mouse, and we brought it back last year through a grant from the New York City Trust, along with Hive Digital Media Learning. We had 3 different locations, 3 different themes, 4 different locations: future communities, climate change, and local stories and immigrant voices. We had these events at, again, 4 locations. So museum spaces, Brooklyn College, 4 of the 5 boroughs in New York City. And we had different Hive partners involved, from Mouse, Institute of Play, for example. And here are some images. We had mentorship models. We had students play different games and then make different games. And we had 4 different breakout stations. So in the afternoon, well, we'd start in the morning, of course, we would talk about parts of games. We'd have a simple hacking tic-tac-toe, for example, because to make a game, you have to know what games are, game literacy, right? Then we had experts come in. So this is inquiry-based learning. This is a button hook, for those of you who don't know what a button hook might be from the 1700s. But that's a museum expert from New York City, starting off the day with inquiry-based learning. And then in the afternoon, this is from the Local Stories and Immigrant Voices Game Jam, these students here were designing games based on that theme. And they're self-identifying their expertise. Maybe they're systems, maybe they're into designing the story or the narrative or the mechanics. And then, of course, we surveyed the students. And one of the more interesting things is students didn't realize that they could actually change a game and make it their own. Here's an example from Global Voices. They created a Scratch game where you play as a Syrian immigrant, and it's kind of like Flappy Bird. But I found this to be adaptable. I use this in my classroom because it's shared on Scratch, so you could share it anywhere. And going back to Sean Berman and his game here, we wondered, how can we make this scalable for even more than New York City? How can we reach more kids globally? So we created this. It's free. Download it. It's on ETC Press. and it's the Game Jam Guide, and it's a curriculum of all of the lessons herein.